function, not only Burma, actually, also as human rights in Southeast Asia, but particularly on Myanmar for decades, although she looks very young still. And she will be talking about the human rights and I think human rights aspect of the movie, and then we will open the discussion. The request is for human rights question or related to Burma that we will be answering, or about the movie Eugene will be answering. But of course we will complement each other.
Thank you, Leah, and I'm really glad that finally I had a chance to be here with at SEA Junction. I'm Malaysian, and I consciously became a human rights activist in 1987. Prior to that, I worked as a crime reporter in the national English newspaper in Malaysia. So soon after I became a human rights activist, I got involved in the Burma struggle. So I've been a supporter of human rights and democracy in Burma since 1988. And gradually over time, there were whispers and people referring to violations against women. Women in the 88 movement, the uprising led by students, in 1988 against the military regime, reported that they had been sexually assaulted by military intelligence while in custody. And then as we interacted and worked with women from the ethnic areas, including particularly Karen State, which had been an area where there had been a war going on for nearly 6 decades, that people started talking about how the Burmese military, the Tatmadaw, were raping women. In 1998, Betsy Apple put out a very systematic, well-documented report called School for Rape. So that was the first time we saw very systematically and comprehensively and irrefutably how the military used rape and in fact also forced marriage of local women to soldiers in the Karen State as a weapon of war and subjugation. After that, the Shan Women's Action Network came out with a report in 2002 called License to Rape. And that also documented what was going on in Shan State. Then we had women from those affected communities doing documentation in Kachin State, in Chin State, in the way in the south in Mon State, and then it became very clear this is not a series of isolated incidents. This is very clearly systematic use of rape and sexual violence against women and girls, yeah, as part of a strategy of warfare. And we have to understand that the UN Security Council adopted UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which very clearly stated that rape and sexual violence against women during conflict is a serious crime and should never be subjected to amnesty. Right? So this is actually acknowledging, the UN Security Council acknowledging that rape and sexual violence of women in situation of conflict is a serious crime. There's been a series of other resolutions by the Security Council on this topic, and they are known as the Women, Peace and Security resolutions. But what it also says is that women have the right to demand accountability. Women have the right to demand protection in situations of conflict, and women have a right to participate in the peace process at any time. Not when the boys have gone to the back room and decided and say, okay, now you can come in now. No, basically this is something that's been said time and again, and it has been codified in the UN Security Council resolution. I'm saying this because women in Burma have been calling for this for a very long time. It's been 21 years since the first comprehensive report on the use of rape by the Burmese military has been produced. And in subsequent reports to UN Human Rights Council, to other bodies, we've seen time and again clear documentation that this has been happening. So for the past 20 years, it's been taken for granted, it's been accepted, it's not been challenged. But also, it has not been changed. So what we have seen in 20 years is another generation of women subjected to this. Those soldiers who commit those atrocities go back to their families in the main cities. Go back to their wives, their mothers, their sisters, their daughters. They bring with them this violence, which was allowed, endorsed, and probably even encouraged. Because what we have seen is not a reduction of this brutality. What we have seen during the time that the international community said, well, no, wait, don't move so fast on this. Give them time. Look, they're having an election. Oh, look, they are transitioning from, look, at least, well, yeah, at least the president is a former general, but at least he's wearing a suit, not a uniform. Oh, look, at least Aung San Suu Kyi is out of house arrest. Oh, now she's in parliament. Oh, look, the NLD, Aung San Suu Kyi is now leading the government. Yeah, she doesn't have that much power, really, because the military has a constitution that guarantees that they can act with impunity. The Constitution legitimizes and legalizes impunity for crimes committed by the military. But, hey, something is better than nothing. At least we see Aung San Suu Kyi out there. But the reality of the situation is that it has not changed. And every time we kept raising this, and not just me, but also all the women from the women activists, including Santoy, who's in the film, Karen Women's Organization, the Women's League of Burma, so many activists stuck their neck out and said, you have to address this. And they were told, oh wait, transition takes time. Give them time. What has happened since 2011 when the technically civilian government was installed? The military has enjoyed 171% increase in their budget since 2011. Not 1 cent was used for gender sensitivity training or human rights protection or how to behave and comply with the Geneva Convention on warfare. No. They use all of that extra money for what? The military then also started to escalate the brutality. We can map out the types of rapes that happen. Yeah, women were gang raped, some were killed, some were mutilated. But then gradually, as things started to escalate, as the international community said, no, don't be so negative. Things will change. Give them time. We'll open up the economy. We're going to invest in the country. Things will get better. Don't talk about the Constitution. Don't talk about this impunity stuff. No. Don't talk about accountability. Accountability will just make the military scared and upset, and then they'll try and make a coup. So just, don't be, so basically the women were told, the feminists, the women were told, you don't be a troublemaker. Don't rock the boat. So what has happened since then? The US State Department came out with a report in September, which actually was a random survey. They went out into these refugee camps, the Rohingya refugee camps, and they went and did a randomized survey. And what they found? This very terrible, brutal tactic of military throwing babies on fire and then raping their mothers. It was not an isolated incident. It was a pattern of behavior. Okay? Nobody suddenly says, oh, look, we saw this viral video, let's try it on people. No. Nobody's going to do that unless they've been told this is the way you should do it. So what we are what is happening very clearly is that we've allowed, the military has been given this sense for many years, this transition, this so-called democratic transition is very good for us. We get more budget, we commit more crimes, and nobody is going to rock the boat. So this is what has happened. Now we're saying, no, 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 you can't do this. Suddenly everyone's saying, okay, we now understand. This is true. This is happening. And what the government in Naypyidaw, what the military has also done, is they bought more time by saying, oh, don't worry, we are having an investigation. Do you know how many investigations have happened on Rakhine State since 2012? 7, 8 now. 8 official investigations. These investigations are basically the police investigating themselves, the military investigating themselves, right? The Muslims were not allowed to be engaged in the investigation. They said, oh, we took a drive, everything is fine. Look, there's a mosque there, so there's no problem. Look, there's a mosque still standing, so there is no violence. Now, in 2016, this video is still online. Jonah Fisher from the BBC went to Rakhine State and interviewed a Rakhine politician who led another investigation because there were allegations, people reported women had been raped in Rakhine State by the military during this another anti-terrorist or clearance operation. So they said, oh, don't worry, we're going to investigate. So this leader of the investigation told the BBC, no, there was no rape. What's your evidence? This guy said, well, yeah, we have evidence. Of course there was no rape. So what's your evidence? Look at those women. They are very dirty. No one will touch them. They're unhygienic. Nobody will touch them. This is your evidence. So not only are they justifying, denying rape, they are actually trying to say, they're trying to use racist, hate language as evidence that this rape didn't happen. I was in the camp a few months ago in October, and I met Jamalida. Now, Jamalida was a Rohingya woman who tried to tell the Burmese media she witnessed rape. So what happened was the Burmese authorities brought a junket of Burmese media to Rakhine State to see, look, everything is fine, don't worry, it's just the Western media making a noise, this is all fine. And this woman came out to the Deputy Minister of Information and the media, the group of media, and said, I saw something. What she didn't say was that she was raped. She didn't want to say that. But she said, I saw women dragged into the bushes by the military, and when they came out, they were bleeding from here. And the translator on screen said to her, were you raped? And he said, no. I actually see Dr. Tan up there. Sorry. And were you raped? And she, were you raped? And she said, no. And I said, then don't say anything. And this was broadcast on Myanmar TV. The translator is actually telling her to shut up, and they actually call this fake news. Now what happened to this woman was that when she went back to her neighborhood, the neighbors told her to run away. They said the military have come to get you because you spoke. So she had to flee to Bangladesh. So I met her in the camp, and she's saying, look, this is what happened. I'm talking to women, I'm trying to mobilize them, I'm trying to encourage them. She's not given up, she's not given up her work. In fact, she's gotten stronger. But at the same time, other people are saying we are really worried for her because she doesn't have a husband. she doesn't have a male relative to protect her, and in this camp, people can come in and get her. Because that camp, when you saw that camp, you just stand on that hill, it's just Burma over there. This is Burma over there. People have been, now we've been seeing a pattern of people disappearing. And there's been many fears of the military hiring refugees themselves or sending people across the border to get witnesses, because the military now realizes that this is going to bite them on the back. It's these crimes of violence, particularly against women and children, that are concerned to the UN Security Council. It's these crimes that will not go away. They have tried to cover up the evidence in Rakhine State, but the remaining evidence are the witnesses and survivors themselves. So here we are. We are thinking, okay, how can we make sure that these women stay safe? They're in a refugee camp that's very precarious. It's even physically precarious. And every time a cyclone is approaching, people get very worried about just, basically their houses are plastic top and bits of bamboo. Yeah? It's a very crowded place. It's very chaotic. And on top of that, the women are calling not just for justice, they're calling for the right of their children to have education. In the Bangladesh camps, Bangladesh government has not allowed the establishment of schools for kids. So the kids cannot go to school. Yeah? They basically hang around. They have 2 hours of playtime in what they call child-friendly centers, and then there's no school. So the women are saying, we don't know how long we're going to be in this camp. We don't know whether we'll be allowed to go back to our homes in Myanmar. But at least we have to make sure the kids are educated, because whatever happens in the future, they have a way of taking care of themselves. So now we have this really horrendous picture where women all around Burma are essentially living in a culture of rape and violence. If your military commits rape and sexual violence with impunity, it's bound to seep into the rest of the society. Yeah? If your military is doing that, then it emboldens other people. Those military come back to society. So we are having this very, very scary problem, and we are also seeing another dimension, which is the economic dimension. The military has used the Rohingya, targeted them, made them into public enemy number one in Burma in order to consolidate and win back their legitimacy and popularity. They've also used this demonized group to justify a 171% increase in their budget. And on top of that, last week, we've seen confirmation of the discovery of titanium and rare earths and other minerals in Rakhine State. So Rakhine State basically is also a site of a resource curse. It's allowed the genocide, and this is, I have not used this word easily, but now it's gotten to that stage where we cannot deny it. We used to say, crimes, serious international crimes, and then ethnic cleansing, and then it's genocide. There's no way around it. And even UN bodies and even international governments have finally recognized that there are what they call genocide-like elements. So this genocide has been very convenient for people close to the military and the military's business partners to secure control over very profitable zones of land in Rakhine State. And that is something that we also have to be aware of. We're not just looking at accountability, justice and accountability in terms of prosecution or investigation for the crimes, of changing the rules and regulations and the system of impunity in Burma, we are also looking at making sure that genocide and these crimes against humanity are not profitable.
Floor immediately for 3 questions for first round, either one, either on the movie itself, on the documentary itself, or on the comments or additional comments if you'd like to share. One.
Hi, so it seems like obviously there's an immense amount of evidence about what is going on in Burma and the atrocities committed by the military. What can actually be done about it? I mean, how can it stop? Sometimes it just seems like we all know about this, and what's actually going to be done about it? Because it just seems like it just keeps on going on and on and on, getting worse, like you say. So it would just be, I mean, you talk about the UN Security Council. What power do they have?
Is anyone else want to?
Sorry, what's your name? Rebecca. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for your question. Okay, so there's a couple of things that we need to be aware of. First, there is a mechanism called the International Criminal Court. Okay, now there was a paper a feasibility paper opened up, which was accepted by the court, and the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court essentially said that since Bangladesh is a signatory to the Rome Statute, which is the basis of the International Criminal Court, and Bangladesh received this exodus, or these people who were so-called forcibly deported, then that opens a door to investigating the crime of forcible deportation. Okay, so that's one thing that's on the table. The other thing too is that people say you can't take Burma to the International Criminal Court because it's not a signatory, it's not a party to the statute. But actually there is a way where the UN Security Council can actually make a referral. What is the blocking point in the UN Security Council? Firstly, there was a movement in 2006, 2008, where Burma was put on the agenda of the UN Security Council. There was a move for that to happen, and it happened. This was 2005, 2008. This was quite important because it freaked out the military and they went to China and asked for help, but they also agreed to hold an election. So this was the fear of potentially being held accountable, forced them to move one step forward. What we are having now is a problem where China and Russia have been protecting the military, the Burmese military, the Burmese government, because China has traditionally been a protector of dictators, and this is a very convenient neighbor next door. But also, Russia has been one of the biggest weapons providers in recent years to the Burmese military. And in fact, the most popular second language in Ulwin, where the Defense Service Academy is located, is not English, it's Russian. They actually have a Russian language course for young officers so that they become eligible for scholarships to study in Russia. So you can already start to see there's a pattern here where the vested interests of Russia and China are protecting the Burmese authorities at the Security Council level. But now, this is also partly why the UN Security Council members were sent on a plane to Bangladesh, to the camps in April, where the representatives saw for themselves and heard for themselves from the women and other survivors. And some of them were quite shocked to be confronted by this, because it had been easy for them to overlook these reports that appear on their desk as well. So this is something that's quite important. And we also have to understand that both Russia and China cannot use all their chips on Burma, their diplomatic chips. They can't use it all on Burma. Eventually a time will come where they will have to step aside. It might be because they have something more important to protect, and this is something that we also have to understand. What is very interesting in this picture is that the US has always had a knee-jerk reaction to the International Criminal Court, because they are philosophically against the ICC. But in the case of Burma more recently, they have decided not to object at the Security Council level. So now we're seeing some movement. And the UN Human Rights Council has agreed to set up what we call a IIIM type situation, where the independent investigative mechanism will collect evidence of a prosecutorial nature. So we have all this evidence, which is human rights documentation, but what they're talking about is collecting and preserving evidence that can be used in any court, in any part of the world, if there's a prosecution in the future. So we have come quite far. Unfortunately, we came this far because of what happened in the past, what happened since 2017. And this is where we need to keep the tension up, because there's always one more other crisis to deal with. And we have to deal with all the crises. We have to keep in mind all the crises. So keep talking about it. Keep it visible. Keep asking questions. That's going to be important. Don't let this problem fade from our memory or from our thoughts.
Okay, like second round. Yes, please. One. This is the last round, so now or never.
A question about the role of journalists. Brian. A question about the role of journalists and filmmakers in the process of building up a body of evidence. Is for instance, footage collected in producing a documentary like this ever likely to be eligible to be used in, say, an international court proceeding?
Actually,
This is the last round.
right.
Is any other? Yes, please.
Some people say that Aung San Suu Kyi's Nobel Peace Prize should be removed because of the Rohingya genocide and exodus. Do you agree? And she's a woman. Are there things that she could be doing that she hasn't done? Why doesn't she take more of a stand? Just trying to understand what her position could be.
Any other? Yes.
My question is on population control. Living in such sorry conditions, I'm sure a lot of the women and the girls would be averse to sex. I'm quite surprised to see so many young children still in
Just a general question really about if people work in Myanmar, or if they work in education, or work for public agencies or NGOs or something like that. It's everything I've learned. Just if people have to work in or with public agencies in Myanmar, and I'm thinking particularly from my own point of view as a teacher. I just wondered what's an acceptable level of engagement. Should there be limits on how far people can get to work in there or forensically there? Or just is it better for everybody to have as much to do with Myanmar as they can?
Yes, yes.
One about all this development program in the camps, rural development, how realistic, it's a little bit naive we have been talk about anti-trafficking. Is this the solution to that? Is the most urgent solution this kind of training? What is the real, what can be done realistically in a situation like the camp, or we are just doing program for the sake of doing a program? What has been what have you tried to do with this? It's a little bit related to, you are trying to raise awareness. I know you have flown around in the States. What is now in Thailand? And what is the plan? And can you tell us more about the campaign that you are trying to do about this? And what is your role? Again, how realistic is that to reach the outcome that you hope to achieve?
I didn't jot down all the questions, so I remembered yours and the Suu Kyi question, which I'll let Debbie take. They're all really excellent questions, and thank you for that. Brenda, just to start off, in terms of the children, most of the children, you have to realize they've only been there a year. So most of the children, out of the 760,000 estimated Rohingya who fled from the most recent crisis, joining the previous refugees who had fled from the 2016 crisis, that's what brought the population of the camp to now be the largest refugee camp in the world, at just over 1.1 million. This is a phenomenal, sort of an unimaginable number, and poses tremendous challenges to the international humanitarian community that has to respond. The emergency phase is finished, but there is an ongoing effort to feed and clothe and house and take public health care. Nevertheless, the issues that Debbie mentioned, which I personally believe are extremely essential, which is education, and the issue that Leah touched upon, which is giving enough appropriate, effective training for example, to survivors or women in particular, to have agency to even feel that they have an ability to change. We also have to be sensitive to understanding the cultural context within which the Rohingya live. Most of the Rohingya who have fled, so most are now expelled from Rakhine State, and lest we forget, the crisis which kicked off, so to speak, in 2012, displaced tens of thousands of Rohingya who, until now, are in guarded military, internally displaced person camps, still in Burma, in Rakhine State, in guarded, essentially apartheid homelands under military guard. The Rohingya in northern Rakhine State, from what I have gathered from talking to many people who assisted us with the film, including a colleague of Debbie's and ours, who's a young Rohingya woman herself, now studying in the UK, who's from an intellectual family, who does not wear the hijab. As you saw, Shamima was the sole woman in the film who did not wear the face hijab. That practice, according to Shamima and others that we spoke to, has not been traditional to the Rohingya. It has only been really in the last 15 years with the ascent of more radicalized fundamentalist imams who were given training in Pakistan, who returned to northern Rakhine State in Budidam and Mongda and created this more rigid implementation of the interpretation of Islamic law with more of a Sharia style law. So all of the Rohingya girls, as soon as they menstruate, are not allowed to leave the house. Even if they're a student, and many girls menstruate at the age of 11. If you're a student and you menstruate from heretofore, you are not allowed to leave the house, and you are only allowed to leave with the accompaniment of at least 2 male members of your family or village. So there is also a lot of education that needs to be done within the Rohingya community, right? And part of this is not a criticism of them, it's an understandable response to their isolation in a place where they literally restrict of every form of conceivable right. To travel, to marry, to work, to attend university, none of those rights, in addition to not having citizenship, have been given the Rohingya. There is a risk of sexual violence within the camp from predators, both from the community itself as well as the neighboring Bangladesh community. There are NGOs, INGOs, international organizations working there. Médecins Sans Frontières is one of the few that has a program of trauma recovery explicitly for the survivors of sexual violence. But we're talking about thousands. Even MSF, like Debbie was asked last night, how many were raped? First of all, I don't believe in quantifying this. One girl who was raped is one too many, in my view. But Médecins Sans Frontières, on the conservative side, estimates that it's 7,000 plus for girls that were raped. So it's an enormous need. So there's a great need for improved access to the programs themselves, meaning that the aunties, the moms, many of the girls who were survivors have lost their parents. They're surviving this like Dil Kayas that you saw in the film. She's surviving this and she doesn't even have a family. She doesn't even have a sister who she can talk to. She's on her own. Who's she going to turn to? So it's a very deep, deep trauma and a very complex trauma. So I think there needs to be more funding for MSF to carry out an expanded version of this trauma recovery program. And I absolutely concur with Debbie touched upon earlier. And last night we had the honor of having Shamima, the protagonist of the film, join us from the camp by telephone. And she is one of 0.01%, I'll repeat, 0.01% of Rohingya women who have gone to university. So you can understand, she is truly an anomaly. But she also is leveraging these skills that she has. And she has said, we had many conversations that were not on camera, I need to educate the mothers and the aunties to pressure their husbands and their uncles and their brothers to allow the girls to go to school. If we could do that, we could just open a window for them to feel a sense of empowerment. As well as the boys need to go to school. So you now have an entire new generation of lost children who were already marginalized from education access anyway, as we see in other conflict areas globally. We see it in southern Thailand, right, Dom? In communities of conflict, education is one of the first disposable services that go. And it is the most vital service that is going, because you are then ensuring the perpetration of another generation of people without agency, without the knowledge, without the basic skill to even articulate the oppression that they're living through. In terms of your question, I would personally suggest that anybody who's currently, and there's been a whole onslaught, there's a whole crowd now in Yangon that have moved there, of young Falang, who are teachers and journalists and business people, and some of them are doing cool stuff, but it's kind of like the new, it's sort of like what Thailand was 20 years ago, it's the new place to go, for people just out of uni. There's been an onslaught of these people arriving. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but be aware of where you are. Don't live in a bubble in Yangon with your, relatively well-paid job and not understand that you are living in a country that has clearly been unquestionably accused of ethnic cleansing and is being considered to be accused officially of genocide. This is a serious thing. Be there, but open your eyes, open your heart, be engaged. Even locally, even in Yangon, there are communities that need your help. So if you have a job at an international school, do it. All power to you. But use some of your time to volunteer with one of the local community service organizations that are working at the grassroots level. That's what I would suggest. And the last thing, because your question earlier about what we can do, Rebecca, I'm sorry, what was your?
Yes,
Rebecca. I really believe that, and Debbie as well, that we don't want to present these things and then have you walk out and go, holy shit, I just saw this film, and it's like, oh man, what am I supposed to do, right? Like, we're all overwhelmed. Look at the guy, the clown in the White House. Look at the stuff in Europe. Look at, no, like the world is like really, really messed up right now. And it's overwhelming, and you don't know, like, what are you supposed to do with it, right? So I believe in creating these films. We've worked with Debbie and her organization. They have it. They're tools. And we have a social media campaign that was created by a wonderful young artist. I love the hashtag, it's her too. Hashtag her too, and the other hashtag is I stand with her. These beautiful graphic posters Leah has put up there. All you have to do, just to do something tonight, go out and take a selfie with the poster and put the hashtag up on your Twitter or your Facebook or whatever. I stand with her or her too. And say that you saw this film with the Kachin or the Rohingya poster. Because every time you do that, and please share it with us, we share it with the Kachin women and women in the camp. And believe me, small things like that, when you're living in a black hole like that, it makes a difference to you. It encourages you. It lets you know you are not alone. People know you. People remember you. You are recognized.
Brian is footage as evidence. I think if there are, this is why we were campaigning for the formation of this independent investigative mechanism, because it's actually collecting data and evidence of a legal standard that can be used in a court. These testimonies are important to be able to establish an understanding of the situation, but probably it would have to be Dil Kayas herself giving testimony in the court, which is why we are concerned about the safety of these women as witnesses. So this is something that's quite important. We can have the forensic evidence, and this is also like what's happening in Sri Lanka now. Over a decade since the war ended, they're starting to collect the bones, the remains. They're finding all these mass graves, and this is what every single bit of data and evidence needs to be collected and preserved so that the chain of custody can be established. So this is something, and when we're talking about ICC, we're also talking about certain courts in the world exercising universal jurisdiction. So there is a legal avenue where courts, including courts in Spain, for example, actually have the competence to decide that this is a crime of such serious concern to the rest of the world, and where domestically there's no way they're going to get access to justice, that the court can decide to exercise universal jurisdiction. The only problem is that the people who, if the perpetrators or the accused criminals or perpetrators of those crimes refuse to cooperate, then the court just has to decide on the evidence that's available, and they can make a determination. But they are not able to exercise the verdict unless this person comes within their jurisdiction. But this is also something that's quite important. So I think, and sorry, I'm saying this, but I have to be very clear that I'm not a lawyer, I'm not legally trained. This is stuff you pick up by osmosis when you start working on accountability. The other thing is about where does Aung San Suu Kyi stand on this? And I think we need to understand the first massacre that happened against the Rohingya was at the end of May 2012, where Rohingya were accused of having raped and killed a Buddhist teacher. And so a mob basically intercepted a bus in Rakhine State, which was full of Muslims who were not Rohingya. They were actually, I think, Muslims from Rangoon, and lynched them in retaliation for this alleged rape. And Aung San Suu Kyi actually met with Muslim leaders soon after and called for calm and said something along the lines that we as the majority have an obligation to protect the minority. But then soon after that, the whole situation escalated, and it became a situation where this was seen to be a threat to national security. So you can't actually say, okay, now I stand on the side of Rohingya, because then they say, look, you are undermining national security. So deciding that this is an issue of combating terrorism is a way to restrict how people can respond. But having said that, of course, everyone wishes and feels that she could have done better in terms of where she stood, where she was on this situation. And she was between a rock and a hard place. As for whether I feel her Nobel should be removed, the Nobel Committee has never taken the Nobel Peace Prize away from anyone that they gave it to. That includes Henry Kissinger and also President Obama. You know, many thousands of people, civilians, were killed under the drone program on his watch. So, I'm not going to go there. But I think deep down inside, deep down inside, everyone thought Buddhism was a peaceful religion. Why are they doing this? And then it's like, oh yeah, they did this in Sri Lanka too. And actually, what's going on in Burma is very closely patterned along the Sri Lanka approach. So then we say, oh, but now we have a woman in charge, so oh God, no. The world is really messed up. I like to think about what can we do, and what we can do is support women on the ground. There are so many women working so hard and working so courageously. Karen Women's Organization, Women's League of Burma, stuck their neck out and put their foot down and said, no, we stand the ranger. We believe those women. We are taking a stand against this. And they themselves were threatened with rape for saying those things. But they are unshaken. They are unshaken. So this is the stuff that we need to think about where we stand, how, instead of going, and there are many things that we can do within our control. So there's, and I think we need to resist this whole feeling of overwhelm, being overwhelmed by how fucked up the world is at the moment, pardon my French. But the reality is this, don't be overwhelmed. We have to get through, we are going to get through this. We shouldn't allow ourselves to be disempowered. So I think when we talk about this, I keep saying we have to empower ourselves to empower the women. Yeah, and that's where solidarity comes in. Don't walk out of here feeling, oh my God, that's so big, there's nothing I can do about it. There's always something we can do. And those women tell us, don't forget us. And I think you need to understand, for us, forgetting, the act of forgetting takes a different dimension. Because when they say don't forget us, they mean don't abandon us. So this is where, because I used to say, why do you keep saying don't forget us? Like, and like, oh, actually, that's one level of don't forget us, but the main thing they're meaning is don't abandon us. So we can't abandon them. Talk about this, keep an eye on what's going on, share it, tweet it, and even if it's having a conversation with someone, this is how we connect with each other. Have a conversation, say, did you read about this? Did you hear about this? This is something. We have to keep those women with us. We can't abandon them. The camps, programs in the camps, is now a situation where basically people are just happy for anything to be done because the situation is so desperate. And also we're seeing what we are seeing is a humanitarian aid fatigue. So people are like, okay, 1 year later, there's another crisis going there, there's another crisis around that place. If you've been to Cox's Bazaar and you approach the camps, there are all these banners like advertising all various governments' contributions, and all the international organizations' banners, and it's like a festival of humanitarianism. And then now we start to see the clinic that they set up, that they publicize in their home state, saying, look, we're helping our fellow Rohingya, or our fellow Muslims, or whatever. There's no one in the clinic anymore. It's empty. Because the people came and did their work and then they didn't continue. their funds dried up. People forgot about these people. So we have to remember and remember and keep up that attention. Yeah. So for me, I thought that the women in the camps is an opportunity because we do need to work on empowerment of women, and we need to work on their education, not just because I'm a feminist, but also because in practical terms, the ability for that community to survive, whether they stay in Bangladesh or go home to Burma, also depends on the capacity and the confidence of women. So we do need to build that. And I'm not interested in preserving the Rohingya community as is with the more recent, and I say recent, misogyny and restrictions on women in the culture, because this is not something that was there 20 years ago. It's something that's relatively recent and a reaction to being abandoned in Rakhine State. So we do need to reverse that trend. We need to reverse that trend back to a situation where women have an opportunity to contribute back to the community. Yeah? Otherwise, this community is no longer, will lose its viability and be increasingly isolated. So and I talk to those guys. I say, look, whether you like it or not, I know you don't want to change, but the thing is that you have no choice. It's time to change back.
As well as empowering the women, you know, we talk about the military success situation, but it's shifted the consciousness of men because I don't, you know, I'm not being anti-men, but obviously we've talked a lot about women, but we keep saying military, and obviously it is, but actually it's men, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not, you know, I know that it's a bigger problem because we know, you know, how many women have died while we've been having this discussion in England and America from sexual violence. I doubt there's a woman in this room that hasn't had some kind of sexual violence or some violence against them in some way.
I think,
so I'm not criticising, I'm just asking what's your response to that? Do you feel that it's such a big crisis that we have to just focus on the empowerment? Because in a way, I do feel with a lot of the political things that went well, unless you have a shift of consciousness somewhere along the line, then
I think we can't shift consciousness. We can't shift global consciousness without acting locally.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it real, beyond the intellectual discussion, beyond the public relations campaigns, beyond the tokenistic statements that go viral. We actually need to make it work at the local level. And one of the very honest conversations I had was with a group of men who in the camp actually previously worked with NGOs in Rakhine State, and they actually had that understanding, and they were doing organizing and having secret schools in their little tents in their homes. They have one room, which is their living room and bedroom, and in the daytime they clean it up and people come and have conversations and classes and secret workshops. And I said, look, we have this crisis where women who were raped during this time are now starting to have kids. And those, when their pregnancies start to show, they get abandoned by their families, abandoned by their husbands, and so on. And you need to talk to them because it's the men who need to talk. And the reality is this, those babies are Rohingya babies. Yeah? They are half Rohingya at least. And if you abandon these babies, you're abandoning one Rohingya woman and a Rohingya baby. So they are trying to kill you off by making you abandon your people and reject your own blood, because these babies are your blood. So do you play this game and fall into this trap, or do you say these are our Rohingya babies, they are back in the Rohingya community, we are raising them as Rohingya? That's basically what it is. And they sat there and I said, you know, because otherwise you lose the women and you lose these children. There's one generation you're going to lose because they were the result of rape. And then these guys said, we understand. I said, well, you got to go talk to your peers. You got to go and talk to the other men in your community. And I think one thing that makes me optimistic is that there are men. It's kind of interesting. There are men in our lives, in our communities, and in some of these communities that surprise you by the fact that they may not say I'm a feminist or gender sensitive, but they actually have a quite strong sense of justice. And it's that sense of justice that puts them on the side of women. So I think we do need to fight back against this acceptance that somehow women should be, or it not even should be, but it is inevitable that women will be subjected to violence. We should be rejecting that sense of the norm.
Inevitable, but I think, yeah, it's interesting about the focus being on the men as
Yeah,
well.
and I think 2 years ago, the students from Burma that I was working with, they actually launched a mini campaign called Men Can Stop Rape. And for the men in the social media scene who saw their campaign were in shock. They said, no, what do you mean? Only women can stop rape. They said, no, you can stop rape. And this is how you can stop rape. First, don't rape. Second, don't support rape culture. When men around you say things that objectify women, say, I don't accept this. When a woman says she's been raped, stand with her.
And then it feels a bit like, I always find a lot of these, not tonight particularly, but it feels like the elephant in the room quite often. Because people
I am
have
fully
these
feminist,
discussions.
but I have to stop
Yes.
this event, although it's very, very important. I think it's very clear, the message. Oh, I thought she wanted to
I just wanted to,
sharp.
a very quick last word is that our colleagues today, 2 journalists, Walon and Jazau, who are Reuters journalists, one of whom, by the way, is a Rakhine, who took the risk to report on a massacre of Rohingya villagers, are serving a 7-year sentence in a completely bogus trial process and judiciary process, and their appeal today was denied. And the reason I mention this is because it's inextricably tied to the issue of the Rohingya that we've seen, and overall issue of the denial of human rights and a free press. So there's also a social media campaign for them that you can see. It's just hashtag free Walon, free Jazau. If you don't remember their names, just Google journalists detained in Burma. And the power of Facebook, do not underestimate it, particularly in a country like Burma, because it has been the primary tool of spreading hatred and vile lies and divisiveness. So use it in your hands to counter it, the way Debbie has just said. Take your photo tonight, upload it, and thank you so much for coming.
I'm sorry for